Right, you lot. And I know, you've seen the title. I'm actually doing this. I'm so sorry. You can click off now. But, I've had to suffer through this, so if you could at least give me a bit of watch time, that'd be brilliant. Right, now, over the past 2 years, I've done these big ranking videos. I started with Boy Meets World, then I did Disney, then I did Pixar. They all did really well. They also got a lot of views, so that's why I'm mainly doing this. Now, I needed a third franchise or film company or selection of films to do. A sensible person would do DreamWorks or something that has some substance to it, but no. You know what? No matter how much we scream about how we're fed up with these remakes, people just keep seeing them. Now, if you've been living under a rock for the past 10 years, we've seen Disney, and now even other companies, DreamWorks, are doing this stuff. Bring their animated classics and turn them into live action to capture nostalgia. You know, so parents can bring films that they saw in their childhood, except now they're a lot worse. They saw as a child. I really hate the corporate side to Disney. I think we all do, and there's a lot of serious concern about how can you actually enjoy them anymore, because it is actually become a corporate cesspool. But honestly, I can't actually knock it. This live action remake thing, because they're securing the bag. I always find it hilarious the same people who will scream for originality in films whenever Disney do something original. They never show up, but yet they go to see these remakes to complain about them. It does make me laugh at. Now, there's been a lot of talk actually around the remakes this year with the Snow White and Lilo and Stitch ones. So I thought, let's actually watch them all and see if any of them are actually any good. Or God forbid, be better than the original. Because surely one or two of these have to be alright, right? Right? Yeah, I think you know the answer. It's going to be very difficult during this process to rank these films as standalone films. So a lot of the sections when I'm talking about these films will consist of me also talk about them as remakes and talk about the changes that they made from the original, some of the stuff that might have been good, some of the stuff that was bad, more times it is bad, and how it is as an adaptation. So it's not solely ranking them as films, but it's also not solely as adaptations. So it's I'm going to try and find some middle ground, but it is very hard to do that. Also, we're only going to be doing the remakes of Walt Disney Animated Studio films and the sequel to those remakes. So sorry, Pete's Dragon, you're out. You would have been third if that was the case. By the way, the Pete's Dragon one is actually way better than it has any right to be. I've also left out the 1994 Jungle Book and the Sorcerer's Apprentice because they're very different and they were kind of before all of this, and they wouldn't really be very interesting to talk about, and I didn't want to watch more films. That's the main reason. So I've had to watch enough, let's be honest. Okay, 22 films we've got in the end, so let's get this over with, shall we? Okay, so in last place and 22nd was debate here. You could put about 5 of these last, but I've landed on Peter Pan and Wendy. When one of these films goes straight to Disney Plus, and not even Disney believe in it, you know it's going to be terrible, and yeah, this just feels so half-assed. Look, the original Peter Pan was never the strongest narrative. I find it quite an overrated Disney film, to be honest. However, where it worked was, it was a film built on imagination, whimsy and adventure, with these timeless set pieces and visual sequences. But then somehow in this remake, it might be the most lifeless world I've ever seen. It just looks like a field. It just looks like something that I could shoot in my hometown. Neverland is barely explored in this Peter Pan film. You don't see all the factions. Look, I get why they cut the Native Americans, but there's no mermaids in here. There's no Lost Boys hideout here. The world building is actually atrocious here. The film would rather be realistic. I don't understand why these films feel the need to take films that were exaggerated and unrealistic in style and then try and play it straight just because it's in live action. Oh, we have to do the realistic version. It's a trend that will come up in a lot of these, but here it's especially bad because you've taken the best element of the original Peter Pan and replaced it with nothing in style anyway. I don't mind changes of style. I don't mind, okay, you're going to take away the imagination and the whimsy for a more mature version. But they would have to add something of value there, and they don't. It's got the same plot. They play it so safe, though. Like, if you wanted to go dark with this and go more like the original book, fine, go there. But they don't. If you want to play on the insanity of Pan and maybe show him being more morally grey, do that, but then they don't. Or, like, even make Hook more interesting. And, look, they try with that. I do really like Jude Law as an actor, but honestly, his performance here is so lifeless. They add bits of his backstory, they establish more about Pan and Hook and kind of show that history there. And there's actually a decent scene with Hook and Wendy where he's kind of talking about that kind of element. And whenever they touched on stuff like that, it was alright, but most of the time it just feels half-assed. Look, I appreciate we get some more book elements and some more lore thrown in here. But the film is not focused enough. It doesn't know what it wants to be most of the time. Now let's talk about Pan himself, and I'm sorry, the child acting is actually unbearable here. Look, he's got the energy and the charisma and the charm to him to potentially be a good Pan, but his line delivery, it just looks like he's reading off a script whenever we see him. And that's from Wendy. Obviously, they want to make her more headstrong and involved, which I can get behind to a degree. Although she already had a level of fightiness in the original, which you can play with that. However, they can't make her headstrong and also like a good motherly figure to the boys. It's like, at the expense of her being headstrong, they also just make her rude and kind of a bad role model most of the time. She had emotion and she made mistakes in the original, but you always rooted for her. And like you kind of saw that she went well. But here she's just mostly unlikable. And also her and Peter Pan have almost no connection. So overall, Peter Pan and Wendy is an underdeveloped mess with a few seeds of potential, and that's the frustrating part because a live action Peter Pan, look, we've seen a lot of these and they've been done quite well before, but here it was just a disaster. 3 out of 10. Okay, we're going into 21st now. Now, before I go deep into the list, I feel like I need to catalyst that there tends to be 3 reasons why these films will fail. Either they misunderstand the original, it's a carbon copy of the original is worse, or it's just a disaster from day one. And that's what we're dealing with Alice Through the Looking Glass. Now after the $1 billion 2010 original, of course a sequel had to happen. Look, there's films above this that actually annoy me more. However, this is just such like a catastrophic mess from the ground up. Now, this film is a time travel film, but the classic message of every time travel film that you shouldn't do it, don't mess with time. Oh, and the Mad Hatter is depressed because he thinks his family are dead, so Alice must go back and save them. She fails and realises that she can't, but then she finds them anyway because the Queen had them locked up the whole time. Wow. Like, the Hatter has no arc here. There's no journey. It's just, he's depressed, they fail, and then they get the thing he wants, and then he's happy again. Like, this is, like, the worst writing. There's no in between there. What's the point of all of that? And no one wanted to see that. No one goes to see an Alice in Wonderland film to see the Mad Hatter be depressed. That isn't the point of the character, surely. They also give the Red Queen a backstory. These films love to redeem anybody. And okay, when it was like Maleficent, and that's the point of the film, I get it. And somehow, despite all that the Queen has done, like the multiple genocides she's committed, and the absolute maniac she's been, her and her sister make up in the end, oh my god. Look, you can have Maleficent, I even let you have Cruella, but the Queen of Hearts. This was just a story that no one wanted to be told. And I don't really like the film criticism of who asked for this. This was unneeded because most films weren't asked for. But this was actually like, there's so many things you could do with a sequel, and this was not it. The film has a villain. I call him a villain. He's not very good. He's called Time. and he's chasing Alice to try and stop her in her journey throughout. He's actually so unfunny.
I know what this means.
And he's actually got a fair point in this film.
When you were young.
That's why I think he's so pathetic as a villain. Because they set it out like you're actually meant to root for Alice. I was just going to save the Hatter. She's doing all.
And now he needs your help.
She does almost cause the end of the world. In a climax which is actually just so tagged on and actually comes out of complete nowhere. Also in this film, everybody that isn't named Alice, the Mad Hatter and the Queen are pointless and are only there because, well, we got to get them in because they were in the first one. But of course, like the first one, the real world plot is the worst. It was something about saving a boat. I couldn't care less. I wasn't really listening, to be honest. The worst part is that this film just randomly in the middle chucked in a scene with Alice in a hospital bed, which was like a seed for like, oh, let's do some character study, mental illness stuff, which is an interesting way that you should dive into a more adult Alice in Wonderland. But then they just do nothing with that. It's like a seed that they never follow up on, unfortunately. Overall, it was a badly written film, a terrible script, and just the worst direction for a sequel. 3.5 out of 10. 20th is actually quite similar to Alice We Were Looking At, really. It's 102 Dalmatians. Actually, like, shockingly bad. After 101 Dalmatians, the remake played it safe, but was charming. This one just decides to go off the rails. We see Cruella go to rehab. Of course, it doesn't work. And she just like goes for dogs again. The whole thing is just such a poor choice that nobody actually wanted this direction for the sequel. No one wanted this adult rehab stuff, and then they half-ass are going wacky in the end. It just completely loses all of the charm of the franchise, and just feels like a misfire when you've not got any of the dogs or the sweet romance or any of that stuff. We get a new couple here who are not memorable. They have a really predictable romance, and then they do a liar reveal plot in there as well. Wow. It's just like the most basic writing, and the first one had basic writing, but the difference here is that the structure and the story is all over the place. The one creative thing I'll give this film is that the fate they give Cruella turned into a cake is actually hilarious. Like, that was the one, I bet that was the whole idea. We want to turn Cruella into a cake. How can we do that? And they wrote out a convoluted way. Look, sometimes this film can be entertaining, but you almost have to, like, question the tone. You've got these really wacky, like, Saturday morning cartoon shenanigans, but you need to forget this film opens with Cruella in an asylum. I don't know who this was for, because it's got really juvenile elements, really adult elements, and it doesn't really even create a family moment. I wouldn't want to watch this on a family night. It's a cash grab, a terrible premise. If you've seen the first one, don't bother watching this one. 3.5 out of 10. Okay, 19th now, and I'm actually upset with this. That I had to put this one this high. Because I actually can't argue as a piece of cinema that the bottom three are better than this, because they're so catastrophically badly structured and made on every level that it would be wrong to put this at least competent film above them three. But this is the most offensive and misguided live-action remake. And I'm talking about Mulan 2020. £30 on Disney Plus you had to pay to buy this, by the way. Remember Premier Access? £30. I can't think of a worse waste of money. Now, before this one even released, it had scandals. And this won't be the last time on the list where we're talking about scandals that weren't to do with the film. That happened before the film. This film was bold. It removed the songs. Bye-bye. It removed Mushu. Bye-bye. And even got rid of Li Shang. Bye-bye. This was meant to be the more mature Mulan, which was already one of the most mature original films. But, okay. On paper, this could have worked. You see a vision, don't you? Mulan with this ambitious scope and deep themes and Chinese subtext, you know, it had huge potential to naturally transfer into live action. I think a lot of these films were meant to be animated. Peter Pan works because it's animated, but Mulan is a film because of its action heavy, because of the set pieces in it. You can transfer this into live action and make a blockbuster. It works. If you didn't watch my Disney ranking, you know that the original Mulan, the 1998 classic, was my second favourite film out of all of them. So I rate the original so highly. However, I did go into this one open-minded because after The Lion King 2019, unlike other remakes, it was at least trying something different. The problem with this film is that it takes and it takes, and it doesn't give you back. If you're going to remove elements, you've got to replace them with something meaningful. But this just subtracts, it doesn't add. You think they replace Mushu with something interesting. No, it's just some thing that follows her. There's a love interest, but he's boring and generic, and he's not got any of the character of Li Shang. There's this short training montage, which is meant to reminisce of I'll Make a Man Out of You. But I can make a better one with action figures. It's that lifeless and pathetic. This film sucks all the life and soul from Mulan and doesn't even replace it. Even the action, which you'd accept to be solid for, how much money that Disney probably spend on something like that, it's poorly edited to a terrible degree. This film completely misunderstands what people loved about Mulan. It was a story of a selfless act of a girl with no ability, through great wit and strength, gains the respect of all of China. Through her own hard work, and because she puts in 10 times more mileage than anybody else, she's able to become a respected warrior despite the fact she's a woman. Here they skip the origin story, and she's just got magical powers. But despite this gift, her struggle is being a woman who has power, and that she's shunned and is told not to use it. Look, I get what they were trying to do there. I just don't find the personal conflict as strong. And I think the original had the fact that she was a woman trying to gain respect, but also had the element of her personal struggles. But here they just subtract, it feels. I feel like it hurts me a lot. Here she doesn't seem as desperate or hard working. They even cut their haircut in the scene, for crying out loud. Also, I feel when the lie is revealed here, she wins them over way too easily. Like in the original, she was almost executed. But here it's 5 minutes later, she's back, and it's there's not much of a conversation regarding it. Her arc and character is just a downgrade in every sense here. The one big addition is a witch. Yes, of course, the famous part of Chinese folklore. Very realistic. We couldn't have songs and a talking dragon, but we had a witch. Now this witch is on the villain's side, as she's assessing the villain, who's not Shang Yu, he's got some other name here, I don't remember, I'm not going to tell you. Now this film rubs in your face the parallel between Mulan and the witch. It's all done in tell not show. And it's the film really wants to push this connection, and even ends with a sacrifice spoiler for the witch. But it feels empty because it was forced. This could have been a really good addition, the parallel was there, but they didn't do show don't tell. The score I really like in this film actually, but it keeps stealing the tracks from the original and teases us. It's this is where the song should have been, but we can't do that because it's mature. This film is an assassination of Mulan. And honestly here I'm only scraping the bottom of the iceberg, but I do need to move on for why I dislike this one. 4 out of 10, and honestly that's very generous. Okay, 18th now is another sequel. God, I can see where they can the Aladdin and Jungle Book sequels. It's Maleficent, Mistress of Evil. This film probably shouldn't actually be above Mulan, as a film. But it's actually just so entertaining for all the wrong reasons. And to be fair, Angelina Jolie is great with what she's given her. No matter what they give to her. This film is so ambitious to another degree. This is Lord of the Rings territory we're going here. There's this all-out war with this massive bloodbath and multiple factions and context and lore and times, and by the time of the third act you lose all semblance of understanding of what's actually going on. This film has the classic set piece of meeting the parents. Aurora and Philip are getting married, and neither side like it because Maleficent still hates humans despite the fact of the first film she got over that, I thought. And Philip's mum, Queen Ingrid, is against it because she's evil and wants Maleficent's whole magical kingdom dead. And then she's able to successfully convince everybody, including Aurora, that Maleficent cursed the king. But dun dun dun, it was actually her. That's a twist that a 5-year-old could have worked out. But Aurora doesn't believe her own mother. I think they make Aurora too stupid here and almost assassinate her. I know she wasn't the brightest, but the fact she turns on her own mother so easily for Ingrid rubbed me the wrong way. Look, The setup isn't really that terrible. I like the idea of Maleficent meeting more of her kind, and I like the message that both sides had their bad eggs and have gone too far, you know what I mean, and that it's not helping anybody. And I like the idea of Philip being that kind of seed to bring them together. The problem is that this film is very aimed at kids in its tone. Despite the fact there's a genocide going on. It's going back to Alice with the Looking Glass, so I'm really struggling to know who this was for. It also just feels really basic and straightforward, and for the scope and for all the ideas, it just feels like they only half-ass half of it. Maleficent also barely actually has an impact in the second act and doesn't really appear until the end of the third act. She's in the title but barely an actual game player in the film. The film had some good ideas, but the execution is a complete misfire and it just doesn't know what it wants to be. Overall, a 4 out of 10. It's a very entertaining watch, I will say though. And I take it over Mulan 2020 for that any day. 17th, now it's time for Dumbo! Remember this one? Okay, once again, Dumbo, a film based off whimsy and simplicity with a great heart to it, despite it not being the most complex and a bit racist, but you know, it's the 40s. Who do they get to direct this? Have a get Tim Burton. And you could tell he didn't want to do this. The whole film just had this atmosphere that is dull and bogged down. There's this damp tone from beginning to end, even in like the triumphant moments, it's just gloomy. And it's not in a usual Tim Burton sense where like it appeals to an artistic style. It's just wrong here. Now the original Dumbo was an hour long. This one's 2. So this feels like a trilogy in one film. There's drawn out and poorly paced as we see the rise and fall and the end of Dumbo's career. Look, I'll give it this. The ending was a good call. And it's kind of touching. But getting there is just such a bore. The film focuses on a father and 2 kids looking after Dumbo. And God, the child acting's bad. Especially from the girl. Look, I know good child acting is rare. But there was there actually no one better that Disney could get? She's got no personality. Look, I don't want to hate on a young girl with a big break, but it was so immersion killing that I actually have to mention it. Also, the father's wife has died. Did you know that? They have to mention it about 50 times. Get it? A mother's important. Wink wink. I get it's aimed at kids or whatever, but it's so on the nose at points. It's actually hard to watch. This is frustrating because this film is filled with good actors. I like Danny Vito, I like Michael Keaton, but their roles are just underplayed here. Although I think Michael Keaton's villain is a great kind of love to hate him kind of villain. But let's talk about the star of the show. Dumbo. He's honestly a non-entity. He's got no characterisation. His mum's got more characterisation than him. He's a plot device. And I know there's only so much you can do, but like the 1940 animated hour-long one gave so much character to this guy, and he didn't speak in that one either, but here it's just pathetic to watch. My favourite part of this film is the fact that there's a merch store that sells stuff from the original Dumbo, because the new one's ugly. Another thing I don't like is how Mrs. Jumbo, from a human perspective, is only aggressive. We don't get to see her sweet side, we don't get the whole baby mine. Baby mine's a joke in this, it's just signed by some random circus person. Look, it's a nice story in the end. I don't hate it, I don't have a fibre in it, but it's just such a forgettable film, and it has no impact on me. But it's better than the train wrecks below it, so I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. For this time, you waited for it, it's the notorious Lion King 2019. This well not worst or best, it definitely makes the case for the most unused. This is a shot down the original film, only made for one movie.
Faster! Quick!
Because there is no crazy
in the gorge! Simba's
well,
down there.
besides this weird obsession from Jon Favreau to have the characters to be photorealistic, so you remove all the characters and expressions from the characters. The Lion King, trying for cartoons and who approves of this style now? It is the film's biggest fault, and it's obvious to anybody. You don't need to be a film nerd to know that. It makes every carbon copy scene so much worse. The death of Mufasa, we all remember seeing it as a kid, one of the most chilling moments of all of Disney. It feels like a comedy sketch on Monty Python here, with a one-punch knockout. Why did he punch him? Whose idea was that? The film almost has no changes, but it's like so much longer for no reason. We follow a lump of shit for 5 minutes. Happens in the film. I'm not like hyperbolic in here. Watch it if you don't believe me. Look, I like some of the stuff they do. Giving Nala a bigger role, actually seeing her escape, that was cool. Exploring Sarabi and Scar, which is something the musical did, and I like that element. The problem with Nala is that they cast Beyonce. She's not great. It's like, wow, we've got Beyonce. Look at this great pool we got. Great singer. But it's actually sad to watch Can You Feel the Love Tonight because she outsings Donald Glover to such a degree. Look, it's two artists I love, but it just did not work as a duet. At all. And look, they wanted to give Beyonce a song, but there was no time in the film to do that, so they just play a song, Simba Runs Back, which feels so just like inserted in at the last minute. Just put the song in the credits at that point. Takes away from the iconic Hans Zimmer score moment that you have there as he runs back, which is one of the greatest moments in the original. Here it's just a Beyonce song that is irrelevant. If you really wanted to do a song in that moment, I mean, He Lives in You is right there. Another musical crime. Now, there were reports before the film that Be Prepared was going to be cut. Now, I imagine the real reason, and Disney would never say this, was because of the very Nazi imagery that the original was parodying. But there was such backlash from fans who, how can you do The Lion King and not do Be Prepared? That they chucked it back in. But they actually shouldn't have bothered, because this version's so half-assed. It's 2 verses, 1 spoken, 1 sung, and then they just chant Be Prepared 50 times. Be prepared, be prepared, be prepared, be prepared. That's a recreation of how it goes. Why did they even bother? I would have rather you not put it in at that point. The songs are mostly okay. I actually don't mind Can't Wait to Be King, to be honest, in this. But you lose so much of the energy with it, because they just run around. Another change comes with the hyenas. In this one they make Shenzi serious and a leader, who Scar doesn't already know. I found that whole thing unnecessary. I like Shenzi, and it's okay to give her a little feud with Nala. I appreciate that. The problem is they don't play her off the other two enough. Like, if she was playing the straight man and then you had the 2 idiots, that's funny. But they don't do that enough. And then they replace Ed and Bonsai with 2 other hyenas whose only joke is that one of them doesn't understand personal space. It's not funny. It's overused too many times. Talking of comedy though, Timon and Pumbaa are actually the highlight in this film. Seth Rogen and Biggie Eichner are genuinely funny. So I'm convinced that they improvised all their lines in this film. Because no one else is funny, but they're hilarious. Okay, one more thing I have to add is they did bring back the late James Earl Jones. I wish they would have brought back Jeremy Irons as well. He would have been a lot better than whoever Scar was meant to be in this one. Fortunately, you can just tell how tired James Earl Jones is the whole time and how much deja vu was going through him. It was a mistake to bring him back in the greatest respect. Okay, that's enough about this one. Just watch the YMS video if you wanted to explore why it's a failure even more. 5 out of 10. 15th now. And it's Snow White. God, here we go. Look, despite what some outlets will tell you, this one is far from the worst. It's not very good, but there's been worse than this one. When a big blockbuster comes out, there's always at least 1 or 2 scandals with it, but Snow White happened to have about 10. And actually on every cylinder was a PR disaster class never seen. Because usually with a controversy there's one big thing, like Ghostbusters 2016, okay, we know the controversy, we know why people don't like it. So many elements of this one which people didn't like. The main character, villain, the sidekicks, the 2 actors were all controversial. Fortunately, because of that, it's very hard to get objective discourse on Snow White. Because when you have material that is so much victim of this tedious cultural crap, unfortunately it is impossible to talk about the discourse of something like Snow White without talking about the controversy. Let's start with the titular character, Snow White. Now, Rachel Zegler is the grifter's new favourite thumbnail face, like Brie Larson before her. Everything she says is scrutinised and made into a 10-minute video with the people securing the bag. What actually happened here? So Zegler basically admitted to not liking the original Snow White and found it outdated, and she called Prince Florian the Prince a stalker and promised that the modern version would be different, with Snow White not having to be saved by the prince, but it would be about her becoming the leader she wanted to be, even though in the film she's actually saved by the prince. Now, was it the best thing to say when you're promoting the film? No. I think, for the most part, she is an outspoken, but at times, misguided, naive girl with some shades of Hollywood arrogance, sure. But the backlash was over the top, let's be honest. People are still going. Like, it's been like 6 months. Get over it. Honestly. And let's be honest, right? Some of it was true. Like, the prince was a bit of a strange man in the original and is one of my most criticised elements. And I'm glad in this version they actually do make the prince... Well, he's not even a prince in this one, he's a thief. They make him more charismatic, and he actually gets to know Snow White. And they have a bit of chemistry, and I actually like the two of them. Even though, again, he does save her. So how is Zegler in this film? She's actually quite good. Like, not all her delivery is perfect, and she can be a bit stiff and expressionless at times, but she does keep the charm of the character, and vocally she's phenomenal, as expected. And the new songs are actually surprisingly solid. Like, Waiting on a Wish is a pretty solid ballad, despite it sounding nothing like the original songs, which is a problem with these remakes, by the way. Zegler may actually be the best part. However, the success of the casting doesn't continue with the villain. With Gal Gadot, this performance didn't work. She's either in this film doing too much or doing too little, and vocally she's just not there on the level of the other actors. I get what they were trying to do with a villain song, but it's out of place, body sung, and feels like it's out of a completely different film. Okay, one thing I've got to point out there that infuriates me to run a rant is that these grifters will complain that the Queen is more attractive than Zegler here, but they fail to understand that, like, Ferris was not about being the most attractive, it was about, like, pure of heart. Okay, so another big controversy with the dwarfs. Now, Peter Dinklage called out Disney over the fact that actors with dwarfism only get to play fantasy characters, so Disney panicked and released a photo with 7 magical creatures. One of them was a dwarf, the other 6 were other random factions, and they were all quite diverse. So that upset all the right kind of people. Let's be honest, that was the main reason they got back there. But also, it was because how can you do so like the 7 dwarfs without the 7 dwarfs? You kind of lost your main tagline. Now, Disney tried to make everyone happy by doing CGI dwarfs, to not upset Dinklage, and to not upset the hardcore Snow White fans, and the grifters. I have 2 separate categories there. But they actually just look hideous. They're so fake, it's actually so bad. The characters also just lack like the visual comedy and character of the original. It's a continuous thing with these remakes, I tell you. The one good addition with the dwarfs though was Dopey. They give him art here. He's a selective mute instead of like a permanent mute, and some would claim that to be offensive, but selective mutism is real, and it was good to see representation of that, and it was a sweet addition. So, the problem with this film is that it's a pacing nightmare, as it wants to be 2 films. One film is the film that Zegler described, of this princess taking the kingdom and the traditional story of taking over with her 7 bandits. And the other half is trying to tell the original Snow White. Because they kept the bandits here. They didn't get rid of these 7 magical creatures. They kept them and the dwarfs. There's too much going. You can't have both. Either double down with your magical creatures and make people upset that you're doing Snow White and the 7 dwarfs and not the 7 dwarfs, or bin off your magical creatures and go all in on the dwarfs. Both. It was a nightmare. And in the end, the dwarfs feel pointless in the 3rd act. The dwarfs were obviously meant to be replaced, but then putting them back in makes the magical creatures feel pointless at parts, and then in the end the dwarfs are pointless because they do nothing in the 3rd act. There's not enough time in the jumble mess for both these factions. The visuals can be hit or miss as well, unfortunately, and the film had a big budget. Certain things can look gorgeous, but then some stuff like the costume design of Snow White, I can't get over how bad the dress is. Or something like the escape scene in the original, which was such creative, scary imagery. Here it's just tame and underwhelming. Snow White is a big budget mess. But the good and bad kind of balance itself out here, and although it's a jumble mess, there are enough good elements in here, but it redeems itself. And at least they listen to backlash. Sort of. Okay, 14th, we're going back down the rabbit hole, is Alice in Wonderland 2010. I'm sorry, this is probably going to annoy people, because I know some people like this one. And it's probably lower than you expected. But look, this is the one we have to blame. This one made $1 billion, and then Disney never looked back. If this flopped, we wouldn't have had all the others. So I have a bit of hatred towards it. Look, Tim Burton for me is a bit of an overrated director. He's got a great, distinct style that's unrecognisable. But more times than not, the writing flops. He's got great films, like Edward Scissorhands, Sweeney Todd, classics, but unfortunately, it translates to Disney live action. Like most directors. This is just a mess on so many facets. I think my big problem is the concept of Alice in Wonderland. It was a film about a world that didn't make sense. Alice was not a deep character, but here she must be a headstrong heroine who must defeat the Jabberwocky. I never got why we needed a hero's journey in Alice in Wonderland. Like, look, she's bland. I didn't like Donald Gleason, the character. I didn't want her to marry him, but I never really connected to her. Certain films, you get the usual suspect, Helen Bonham Carter and Johnny Depp. They're doing the best they can, but the Queen of Hearts is too unhinged and almost over the top in elements. And a Mad Hatter is almost not mad enough. They commit too far one way with one. The film feels overloaded. A lot of the cast just feel like, okay, we got to chuck them in. But unlike the original, where you see them one by one, here they're just all thrown in at the same time. And almost none of them add anything to it. It feels dated. It feels like a 3D era film. And God, Johnny Depp's dance in this film, it is atrocious. It's a CGI abomination. Underdeveloped. But the biggest problem is that they take a world that isn't made to make sense and they try and bring gravity and reality to it. And try and make it into a serious hero journey $1 billion blockbuster. And it falls apart, completely misunderstanding for me what Alice in Wonderland is. This is something new, and it failed to deliver. 13th, and honestly, this one is way higher than I thought it would ever be, is Pinocchio. I'm the only one who didn't mind this one. Yes, it isn't great. It's a live action remake. But the way some spoke of this when it came out, I thought it'd be down there with Pan and Wendy. But I was actually pleasantly surprised, because it wasn't that bad. It follows most of the beats, has some good jokes, and even adds some elements which I quite like. We dive more into Geppetto and the son he lost. I thought that was a natural thing you would do. I quite even like the performance of Tom Hanks. I know some people have had mixed opinions, but I think he does a decent job here. Another thing I like is the ambiguous ending. I think it's a good message. It didn't really matter that he was a real boy in the end, but he was Geppetto's son and he was as good as a real boy. Pinocchio, a nice puppet friend, which was a nice addition. They also had that bloody bird. What was the point of that awful bloody bird? The main flaw here, it isn't all rosy, because Pinocchio was way too moral. Instead of making bad decisions, a lot of this one is just bad luck. Here he actually goes to school, but he's thrown out. So it makes sense for him to join Stromboli because he was rejected, instead of him purposely not going to school in the original. It feels that Pinocchio is more self-aware, so that makes Jiminy feel more pointless. He was already quite pointless as a conscience in the original, and I talked about that, but here he feels even more so. It doesn't feel that he really learns right from wrong, or at least it isn't as clear-cut. It also feels like it's just off pace-wise at points. It feels like he's moving faster, despite the film is longer. It's a common trend that these films, they are longer, but they feel rushed, and I don't understand why it is. Also, Pleasure Island is so neutered. It lacks the horror. It lacks so much from the original. Also, we get the common problem here that Pinocchio's rewarding for lying, and that is kind of a mixed message because it helps him get the kids. But I think this one, I think kids will like it. I think it's an easy to tolerate one. It's an alright for a Sunday afternoon kind of film. But it isn't quite as good as the original. But I think there's many of these that are far worse. I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. 12th. And it's time for Mufasa. This one is just actually bizarre. Some of the decisions that they make. Now, unlike all of the ones below this and above this was a story that people actually wanted to see. Well, they wanted it in animation, but the Mufasa and Scar backstory is something people asked for. They wanted to know. I believe there was a comic about it. It's something that people were interested in. And after the 2019 one made $1 billion, it was easy for them to do another one. I'll give it this. The visuals have improved. But also, in a weird way, it's kind of worse. Because they emote more here, and they have put effort to improve that, but they're still photorealistic, so it actually just looks strange at points. But it is better in other moments. Okay, so the plot is just really odd here. I don't understand this story, why they went for it. So it turns out Mufasa isn't even royal, and him and Scar, who they called Taka in this one, are adopted brothers. I guess that solves the Covey issue when we get there. This is a film about Mufasa becoming a leader. He's a proper Mary Sue. I feel like if Mufasa was a female character, there'd be so much more backlash for him in this, because bloody hell, he has no struggles. His only problem is romance. And that gets solved quite quickly, let's be honest. He just gets what he wants. He gets saved at the beginning by Taka, and then after that he's practically perfect. And he's really boring. You root for him, you want him to do well, he's a morally good character, you know what I mean? Okay, we don't need a super complex hero. If the villain's better. But unfortunately, we'll get to him in a minute. Look, the whole Taka thing is really divisive. To be honest. The main motivation for his turn is that Mufasa takes his girl. Look, the original Scar was very petty. In the original, his motivation, let's not forget, was that Mufasa had a son who was more in line than him and he wanted to be king. It wasn't deep. I don't understand the criticism here. I buy that as a kind of thing that would put a wedge in their relationship. The thing is, with Taka, is how pathetically awkward he is. I get they've got to make him a bit of a loser to, show that he's lesser of a leader than Mufasa. See how this guy becomes the mastermind that's Scar. The problem also here is that it falls into way too many of the prequel traps which we all hate. Did you ever wonder how Pride Rock was formed? I didn't, believe it or not. Or where Rafiki got his stick. Got Lin and Miranda doing songs, and this was a big point in the marketing. Wow, we got Lin. I wish we did the Miranda song. And honestly, you could tell he was phoning it in on a lot of these songs. The Brother song was annoying. Bye 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 is hilarious for all the wrong reasons. Mind the Taka kind of turn song, but I just felt at points it just wasn't as good. The bad guys, they're white lions who are white. Are they there to sell toys? Why are they white? Is it to show that they're the bad ones? Is it to piss off a Kimber crowd? I don't know. Venom's so one-dimensional. He's not threatening. And then Taka joins him later on for reasons which I still don't really understand. I haven't even got to the worst bit. And no, it's not Zazu's jokes. Bloody hell, John Oliver's trying way too hard. The film is a story being told by Rafika Tiara, who's Simba and Nala's daughter. Okay, fine. The problem is, Timon and Pumbaa are also there, because they were funny in the first one. Here, they're just a nuisance. The film keeps cutting back to them, and they make fourth wall breaking, not very funny jokes, killing the tone. I wish we had more time fleshing out the actual characters in the film, instead of this pointless meandering and pop culture references from Timon and Pumbaa that feel like jokes at the Timon and Pumbaa TV show, not an actual blockbuster. One more thing, I'm so glad they killed Taka's dad. Screw that guy. Overall, it's not the worst. This one's just quite bizarre. But I was amused by it to a degree. And there was some stuff I did like. The Lion King 2019 because it's got a purpose. 6 out of 10. 11 out of 10. It's time for the latest abomination. Nah, this one's actually alright. It's Lilo and Stitch 2025. First of all, it's way too soon for a remake. It's been barely 20 years. This one is a lot like Pinocchio, really. Everything you loved is there, but everything feels less organic, more rushed and more lifeless. I am a broken record in this ranking. I think the original lended itself so well to animation, with kind of the watercolour background, the crazy aliens, and Lilo's eccentric personality. It just doesn't translate in the same degree. Let's talk Lilo's personality and characterization. In my Disney ranking, I praised her as her character and how complex she was. In this one, they zero way too much in on the cuteness and less her character and complexities. It's the face of the story in the original. Here, it kind of feels more like a side plot device. Her bond with Nani is still strong. I like the song they sing. Nani's character here is more focused on her career, and the film gives an ending that completely changes the message, leaving Nani to give up Lilo to a neighbour to follow a career which is very well built up, granted, but I have very mixed views on. I don't hate it. It's more likely what would happen in the real world. And yes, it was a lot to put on Nani's shoulders, and they had more support systems here, and they made it here so Nani wasn't as isolated, which may have subtracted in degrees, but also was more realistic. Weird way, I think the selfishness of Nani in the original to give up everything for Lilo and to show that strong family bond was a really powerful thing, and said a lot about who Nani was. Yet she deserves to go get her career as a marine biologist, I believe she does. I don't get why the change was that necessary. I don't hate it. I don't think it kills the story like some people do. I think they can still have a strong family despite the fact she's gone away. But I just think it was a bit unneeded. Lilo and Stitch was universally agreed that the alien stuff was not as good as the stuff with the sisters. Somehow it's worse here. Pleakley and Jumba's design are so bad. They got Stitch so perfect, and they got them so wrong. But because of the terrible design, they spent most of the time as humans. Ruins it. If you can't do Jumba and Pleakley in live action, why did you make the film? They're not as funny as the original, they're more tedious, and you hate coming back to them, to be honest. I think Jumba the big bad here, and they cut Gantu, and honestly, like that change, everyone, did you really miss Captain Gantu? He was a dull villain, who was only thrown in there because they needed a bad guy, and Jumba has more connection to Stitch and a reason to want to take him back. I did kind of like this change, although Jumba gets no redemption, which is a shame, but I didn't really like him in this one, so he didn't really deserve it. Cobra Bubbles is downgraded in almost every sense. Got a colleague, they do nothing with her, and she's kind of doing most of the work anyway. Really took away that side of him that you saw how he genuinely wanted the best for Nani and cared for the girl, but had his job. Here he's just kind of an agent, and they don't give him that humanity. Stitch. Before, the design was spot on. They really avoided a Sonic situation. He looks so great here. And he's still as entertaining as ever. However, my one issue here is they do this fake out Stitch death. It goes on for way too long. I wonder if they're going to kill off Stitch. Spoiler, that they didn't. Despite being longer, once again, this film manages to cut most of the most iconic scenes. Like the Elvis and Ugly Duckling scene. How did you cut the Ugly Duckling scene? Who decided that? I love the original Lilo and Stitch, and this is a decent adaptation, but it's a letdown. It's miles off the original, let's be honest. 6 out of 10. Okay, ready for the top 10? We've only slightly gone up throughout this. Okay, let's start with the one that really started it all. The 1996 101 Dalmatian. Honestly, this is quite similar to Lilo and Stitch, but less offensive. Film manages to keep it simple. They keep the charm, they keep the opening as amazing as ever. The romance is sweet, the dogs are cute. My main problem with the dogs though is they obviously don't talk, so the escape takes all that tension from the original, and it feels way too for the kids than the original, which has some dark, scary imagery at points. It feels more comedic than dramatic and lacks tension. And for me, that third act and that escape was the best part of the original 101 Dalmatian. Here it feels for kids. Also, Cruella here clearly isn't as iconic. Pat does a solid job of what she's given. Cruella's lackeys feel like a weak, poor man's Harry and Marv. The film is fine, it won't offend you, but it isn't amazing. It's a 6.5 out of 10. Okay, 9th. And it's time for the very divisive Beauty and the Beast 2017. Here we go. Somehow this ended up as one of the better ones when I'd watched all these. I'm as surprised as you are. This one is such a mixed bag of good thing, bad thing. But at least it has some good things. There's some good twists, there's some shit twists, but at least it's got good elements. Let's start with the cast. Emma Watson as Belle was a massive miss, casting-wise. I swear they only casted her because she played another character who liked books. Movie musical constantly casts A-list actors who are not very great vocally. Emma Watson isn't even the worst singer, but it's the way they pitch correct her performance to a point it loses emotion where every word is a different take. This sort of thing could work on a T-Pain or Playboi Carti song, but not in a musical ballad. Isn't the strongest when it comes to her acting either. She either oversells it or have no emotion. And she just doesn't have the little quirks that I loved in Paige O'Hara's character. On the other hand, Luke Evans and Josh Gad are perfect, respectively, in their roles. They have so much energy, and the Gaston song is probably the highlight of the whole film, which is why I'm convinced again it was mostly improvised. The two play off each other well. Remember when LeFou gay was a big thing? All that fuss over 10 seconds. Like, I was genuinely looking for it on this watch, and I actually missed it. That was actually Disney's fault. First gay character. 2 seconds doesn't count. I'm sorry. That was way too much talk for nothing. I actually like the changes they made to Gaston. He's more of a powerful idiot brute here, but he's a war hero. He's genuinely more evil. And there's a reason people look up to and materialise him here. He is this hero who's done good things. However, his fate is so much more dramatic. Boo! He just falls off a bridge. I want him to fall off a cliff. Boo! Dan Stevens' Beast is a lot more rude here. In the original, he puts up a front, but you see him folding quickly, like how he's the one to give Belle his room. Here it's Lumiere who does that. He's a lot less likeable. I never liked his design. I get why they did the CGI and the prosthetics, but it never looked great. The character feels so stiff and rigid. In the original, the Beast would crawl around, had so much character. It wouldn't look right in live action, obviously, but he isn't the same. One question that was always raised in the original for me is why were the servants punished? They didn't really do anything wrong. And they try to give a reason. Apparently it's because when his father consumed the beast and was nasty, they did nothing and didn't step out their place as servant and risk the sack. That was very harsh. But the Enchantress here is just a full-on bitch. She's a real character here, just pretending to be poor. She could fix things at any point, but makes the whole town suffer because of one man. She was the real villain here, not Gaston. One thing I do love though is that when the last petal falls here, the servants become household objects forever. This adds so much more stake, and also makes me hate the Enchantress more. I tell you, she's the real villain. One change I don't like, however, is this book that the Beast has to go anywhere in the world. So the Beast and Belle go to France to have her childhood. Look, I like seeing stuff from Belle's childhood, and we actually get to hear about Belle's mother here, and we get depth with that. We even have a scene earlier on with Kevin Clive Maurice, who's great, where they actually speak about it. I like that. But the problem was, it really takes away from the isolation of the mirror being the only glimpse of society, when he can just go anywhere. He could go to Antarctica if he wanted and just chill out there. I don't know why they added a book. It was a lazy plot device, really. Overall, 6.5 out of 10. Okay, 8th now, and probably the most forgettable out of all of these, but it's just floated this high. It's Lady and the Tramp. It's pretty much just one of those live action dog films, except at least they get to talk, so it's better than 101 Dalmatian. It's got a nice charm to it, it keeps the spirit. I never really loved the original, and this one feels about the same. Lady and Tramp have decent chemistry. I like the casting. Some don't like how headstrong Lady is and how she's more proactive, but I still think she had a good level of naivety. It wasn't like she was a complete Mary Sue or anything, but she had drive. The big issue I have here is they completely flop the spaghetti scene. It isn't as iconic. So, oh yeah, time for this scene. The climax is equally as forced as the original film. This catcher after Tramp, and I actually quite liked him, he was quite funny, but it is a bit overused. Oh yeah, they get rid of the Siamese cats, thank God, but they replace them with those boring cookie cutter replacements. At least make them memorable if you're going to do a replacement. and they had this really forgettable song. If you can name one lyric of their song, I'll give you £100,000 without googling it. I can tell you for certain you can't. Overall, it's inoffensive, but it doesn't quite have anything to stand out. 7 out of 10. I don't know how this one is here, genuinely. It's Maleficent. Maleficent 2014 is a tonal disaster and a big money clusterfuck with a ridiculous plot at times, and one of the most over-the-top third acts I've seen. Well, until the sequel, of course. But somehow I kind of like it. I think a big part of it is Angelina Jolie. Perfect casting, the performance is so strong. Look, I can see why this one was successful. I like the first act. It's clearly not the same Maleficent the animated, but they have fun with the backstory. It's solid, and you really do feel sympathy for her as it goes on, unfortunately, and a relationship with Stefan, how it deteriorates. However, I don't really like King Stefan. He's not fleshed out, we don't get his full motivation, and he's almost cartoonishly evil by the end, when she's the most grounded character. As for Aurora, well, somehow she's more wooden than the original. I'm actually impressed that they did that somehow. But I do really like the twist at the end. They do have a nice relationship. I feel bad for the prince, he's just kind of there. It just kind of really works. I like this world. It's missed potential, but somehow I don't think I've sold it very well. I've given this a 7 out of 10. Don't ask me why. Spent enough time on controversy with the Snow White section, but honestly, people complain about the shot-for-shot stuff. Why does it matter that Ariel doesn't have red hair in this one? Like, Hailey Bailey is fantastic vocally. And a part of the world, and her version of part of this world, may be overstung at points. And it may fail to match Jodie Benson, but it's still such a solid rendition. And for a mostly non-spoken role, as her voice is obviously taken, it's just of its expression. People say Shaq's too dumb, but like, did you see the original? She was 15 at Ariel in the original. And she wasn't the brightest. You could complain a lot more if she was too knowing and powerful, trust me. It's frustrating. On the one hand, the human stuff must improve. Eric is so much more interesting with dreams, a backstory, and the romance is so much more fleshed out. It's a lot stronger. I like Eric's mother a lot, and Ariel and Eric here have shared interests, and you see why they connect. It's not just a random voice in the ears, and you've got to be in love with her. They bond, and you see that build. I love Eric's new song as well. It's a bit High School Musical too, but it's a great addition. It actually does fit well, because they bring Anna Menken to join do the songs. The idea to give Ariel's song in the really liked for the first time. It was a clever idea to give Ariel's song in her head. That's quite on brand. However, the scuttlebutt, oh Lynn, what were you thinking, is catchy in the worst way. Okay, let's talk about my main drawback. For all as much I love the stuff on land, and it's such an improvement, the ocean is so dry. All the character, colour and life, it doesn't exist. It's like they barely bothered. Under the sea, you can't have all these creatures with unique character design danced around. It's all good character design. How did they approve Sebastian? I actually can't believe it. Flounder, can you stay in the sea, mate? I don't want to see you. They make Aquafina be Scuttle. She's okay, but can be a bit much at times. Let's talk about Ursula. Melissa McCarthy's Ursula felt like the Disney Descendants version of Ursula, in a bad way. I like that her and Triton are sisters, however, I just didn't find her as menacing. She's very entertaining as Vanessa, and I wish we got more of that in the film, because for the brief moment, being this chaotic zaniness as Vanessa was really fun. I love David Diggs, but I wish they gave a real Jamaican accent to Sebastian, because God, it's jarring at times, as much as he tries. The strengths in this one, and the stuff I love, actually improve. There is so much of this film that actually improves The Little Mermaid as a story. And the stuff is better than the original, and some elements are better than stuff done in my number one. But the weaknesses are down there with The Lion King. So overall, 7 out of 10. Top 5 now. And somehow, it's Aladdin. Wait, this one was actually good? I don't know how, really. It's not without its problems. It's a live action remake. Let's talk Jafar. It's actually pathetic, like how wrong they got him. He's not sinister and menacing. He's camp and weak. That's not Jafar. He's all talk, really. You know, he does serve his purpose. He is a villain that you dislike. Maybe not for the reasons that you want to dislike him, but still. This one really works because of the energy. The story, similar to Mulan, translated very well to live action. the cinematography, sets, and just the whole world is really well translated. The big impossible task with bringing Aladdin to live action, however, was replacing Robin Williams. It was an impossible task, but with Will Smith, he brings his own style and energy, and it kind of just started to make sense. The only problem I have with Will Smith's Genie is when it comes to the songs, it's a bit awkward, because he's still trying to do the Williams stuff. Of course, you've got to have the songs in it, but that's not really Will Smith's style. He tries to bring a British flair to it, but I just don't think it works entirely. The Genie as a whole is given a lot more character and a romance that I don't love, but you know what? He deserves a happy ending. I'm very torn with Naomi Scott's Jasmine. She's pretty good, and she was already 2 decades ahead and was the most progressive princess, so you can kind of get away with it. However, in the original it was very clear that she was kind of wrong. Her views very much came from a place of privilege and lack of understanding the world, but she did have the right heart. Whereas here it's kind of pointed that she is all-knowing, and whereas here she's like pretty valid and is just already the perfect leader. Didn't have that much of an art, but it was more about being silenced, and it worked fine enough. Aladdin is fine. Mina Masood does a fine job of the character. He's got the charm, he's got the charisma, but he's nothing to write home about. The film is just really funny. It fills in a lot of plot holes here and there, although they still do the have to wish to be a prince again bullshit. If Jafar wasn't a joke, it could be in the top 3, but he is, so it's a 7 out of 10. Okay, fourth, and we're probably the one you expected to be first, is The Jungle Book. I feel like even most people who hate the remake say that this is the good one. And I think it's because it genuinely comes from a place of purpose. The original Jungle Book was a fun shenanigans film with iconic characters and songs, but it didn't have much in the way of plot and themes. Here the tone is serious, the themes of manhood and man versus nature really come into play and add a lot more to the subtext. For me the standout is Shere Khan. He's really underused really in the original. Here they bring him in as an early threat who actually does something, killing a killer. And throughout the story, despite him not being in it, he's a looming presence. But I think bringing him in the beginning was a great shout. And Idris Elba's vocal performance is absolutely amazing. Although, really Shere Khan has a fair point about humans. But he does go about his things in the wrong way. But I like that we get more depth and actual backstory to the character. A lot of people don't like Bill Murray as Baloo. I found him funny, to be honest. The character design and visuals are a bit outdated 10 years on, but at the time they were fantastic. I've seen a lot of people mock the kid who plays Mowgli. I think he does an amazing job. Just imagine the challenge he had, being the only real thing in a completely CGI film. I think he does fantastic. Overall, the plot and tone are really solid, and an upgrade on the original. I like the cast, but one thing really holds it back for me. The songs were a big part of the original, and they do keep the 2 songs you remember. The Bare Necessities was fine, because it was a cute little moment. It's just kind of a song that Blue was singing. However, completely out of nowhere in a very serious scene, King Louie sings Friend Like Me, which is a total whiplash. I don't like this whole filler section. I really don't like King Louie. I'm sorry, he's out of place. Tonally, it didn't work. The design, the voice, I just don't know what it was. It wasn't funny. It just felt like a pointless detour. I couldn't tell if they wanted him to be a serious threat or comedic the whole time. I think if you cut that whole section, it'd be a way better film, and that's really drags it down. That and a lot of the kind of visuals and technology just hasn't aged entirely well. And the book is a lot better. But I think this is one that definitely had a vision that they delivered on, and it gets a lot right. Not as much as a cash grab, at least it feels that way. But it has its problems. 7 out of 10. Okay, top 3 now, and it's time for Christopher Robin. Sometimes less is more of a film. This film is a very predictable film. You've seen this done 1,000 times. The once whimsical child is a boring grown-up businessman who must be reminded of who he is and bring out his inner child. It's been done better before. The film has the most one-note, mustache-twirling villain who is over the top and doesn't act like a real human. However, he works as a threat because you do hate him. But despite all this, the film just is able to create that timeless charm. The characters are so perfectly translated. They bring the humour naturally by putting them in the real world. But they never go too far. This could have been Alvin and the Chipmunks and it wasn't. I'm very glad for that. Pooh is an endearing, well-meaning, but as naive as ever. And Ewan McGregor does a decent job for what the character requires when it comes to Christopher Robin. And he plays off Pooh very naturally. They don't do anything to try and change the world. It feels like a natural sequel to the many events of the Williams world. Everything Alice dreamed of being. It's simple but charming, like most Winnie the Pooh films. And it just feels like a really fun 90-minute adventure. It's not going to blow your socks off, but if you had to watch it for an afternoon, it's a solid time. And it's not got as many flaws, so that's why it's 7 out of 10. Okay, just 2 left now. Have you worked out what they are? Okay, runner-up time, and this one might surprise you. It's Cruella. Okay, now before you watch this film, you must accept that this is not the same Cruella. Even the musical Twisted knew Cruella as the one Disney villain you cannot defend. So if you ignore how stupid it is of an idea to do a film about redeeming Cruella and make you feel sympathy for her, this film is actually really good. It just looks amazing. The set design, costume, the world, they go full out and it's just mesmerizing to look at. It's just fantastic. You really get immersed. The amount of care and detail into every frame just makes it feel like it was a passion project, even though it's another Disney remake. Emma Stone plays both Estella and Cruella so well. She has a monologue which could be cringe, but she absolutely slashed with it. She's having a blast with it. And Emma Thompson is so easy to despise and having so much fun with her roles. The well predictable the story is, it's a very solid concept. I love how insane both these 2 lead characters become. I mean, she fakes her own death, for God's sake. And the climax and the way in which Cruella wins is so satisfying. Yes, it's predictable, but you just love it. And the big twist that the Baron is her mum adds so much. Also, the soundtrack is just so on point. Almost every track works. It shouldn't be distracting, but it just isn't. I do feel the pacing in the late second act is a little slow. I think it maybe outstays its welcome a little bit. Also, you just have to look past there's no way Horace and Jasper should have been her friends since childhood. That was stupid. And of course, the problem that Cruella ends up with dogs and doesn't kill any. I mean, I think we just have to take this as a new character. Because there's so many things that don't work with the original Cruella lore. So I don't really think I can put it number 1 as a remake, because it's not faithful at all to Animation. But as a new character from top to bottom, it is a blast to watch, and genuinely a good film. I think these top 3 are good films. Okay, and the winner is, and there was really no contest, it's Cinderella 2015. I'll put my hands up and say this is better than the original. From the start, the tone is kept. We actually get Cinderella's childhood and the impact her mother had on her, as well as giving Tremaine that depth and seeing her rejection, to seeing how rejected she felt and the wrong way she dealt with that to become the evil Lady Tremaine. This film is focused on Cinderella. It's better paced than the original. They actually let Cinderella meet the prince early and have chemistry. They have a good time. The prince is not as good as the live action Eric, but we see his relationship with his father and we give him personality. He actually comes to collect Cinderella at the end. That was one of my biggest problems with the original. Lily James has all the charm. They make her headstrong in her own way with her constant kindness and putting up with her mental strength. They really emulate that, I think, a lot more, why Cinderella's so headstrong in their own way, than in the original. They really cut down the mouse shenanigans or pointless drawn out scenes, and it's just a better told, mature adult story from start to finish. Not everything is perfect, however, the comedy doesn't always really work, and most of the side cast are quite boring here. But as a whole, it just is a classic fairy tale that gets so much more right than it gets wrong. This was what these live action remakes should be. Take these films, actually improve them, add necessary depth, don't go overboard with it. Cast likeable people and do stories that have a reason to be done. We didn't need a live action Lion King, but Cinderella was a film that could have been improved. And that's why this worked so well. 9 out of 10. So it's over. At least there was a good one at the end. That was magical. Unfortunately, many of these films we find are just lifeless, low effort, lesser version, time and time again, trying to overdo each other for who can assassinate the original more. A lot of these remakes take, and don't replace effectively. A lot of these remakes feel the need to add so many new elements, but don't actually think what the impact of their changes are. These remakes can be good, but the thing is, it doesn't even feel that Disney want them to be. Unless they want to be good. So yeah, overall, I must say, it's been a journey like none other. I'm going to do DreamWorks next year. I think it'll be a lot easier. Right, it's so long.